Welcome to this week's Hearts Wide Open. Do you ever wish you could be more of a success? Do you ever worry that rather than hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant" from Jesus, it might be more like Alan Sugar, "You're fired"? Well, according to my guest today, Terry Eckersley, for a true apprentice, it's more likely to be, "You're hired." Terry, welcome to UCB.
Hi Paul, great to be here.
I'm referring, of course, in the Alan Sugar and Apprentice references, to this interesting little booklet that you've written called The True Apprentice, You're Hired. So in writing the book, you were looking to get what message across then? You're hired? What did you mean by that?
Well, I wrote the book because a big Christian organisation were looking for some publications to get out to all their people, and they approached me, so I got the message transcribed, tidied it up, and the message I really wanted to get out was the true message of discipleship, and not getting it the wrong way around, like you're a disciple so you're right with God, but we are right because of the finished work of the cross.
Yes.
And therefore, from a position of right standing with God, we become a disciple of Him. We become a true apprentice, not of Alan Sugar or Donald Trump, but of Jesus Christ Himself.
And because the end work has already been done,
yes,
we can do that with confidence because it's not perhaps down to us to try and make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got so fed myself from this scripture and so encouraged. I mean, Jesus said, "It's a large work I've called you to, and it's a work that I'll help you with." And giving a cup of cold water to the least of these. And it just really simplified for me the gospel message and simplified the message of true apprenticeship or discipleship.
Yeah. Part of what you say in there is the part of that revelation, part of that personal ministry, was to stop worrying. Really? You never worry anymore?
Well, it's an interesting thing. It's a great subject to talk about worry. I'm tempted to, but I don't go there. And what really solidified that in my life, in my mind and through to my heart, was when Jesus said, "I've called you to do a great work, a big work, a huge work." That's what He says in the Message translation. He says, "But do not worry. I'm going to help you do it." And at the time I was worrying. I was called to build a brand new organisation. We'd got a huge building. I'd got no staff. I'd got very limited finance. I'd got a call from God. So that's why I was tempted to worry. And I felt the pressure, the challenge, the stress coming down on me.
Was this developing the work of the YMCA?
It was developing a brand new YMCA in Surrey. And of course I was seeking God, and I knew about casting my care on the Lord. I knew about
easier to say than do.
Confessing scriptures and praying and stuff. This passage really spoke to me, and the do not worry. And I learned to make a quality decision not to worry, and renewed my mind to that fact, and kept casting my care. And by doing that, and I think becoming an apprentice of that, becoming a disciplined one of doing that, now that's like a mindset in my mind, like other foundational truths that have dropped, and I don't worry now.
You took the YMCA. You got this thing YPod as well.
Yeah, that was our first building. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you maintain that? I won't worry, because the pressure on you must have been really substantive.
Yes, it was as I kept casting my care and not worrying and truly trusting God with all my heart. I had nowhere else to go. You know, I'd done everything, tried everything, and then God would take the pressure off, if you like. I'd feel God's presence. I'd sense God's tangible presence. And then He'd bring someone, or He'd bring finance, or He'd bring a new building, or He'd bring this. So behind the scenes, I've always come from the highest position I'm hired, and everything I've done and built has been by faith and prayer. Everything that I've done. So I've not done and asked God to bless it. I've been behind the scenes asking God to build it, you know?
Yeah.
That's the position that I was led and called into.
That's an important difference, isn't it? Allowing God to take the lead.
Always.
And, we kind of follow on and, okay, I'll do this now. You're showing me to do this.
Always.
Your choice of the phrase "YPod."
Yeah.
Did you deliberately set out to annoy Apple?
No, I didn't really.
Because they weren't very happy, were they?
No, they weren't happy. No, I was speaking directly and having communications with Steve Jobs, by fax, signed by me and my board, and Terry Eckersley, chief exec, and Steve Jobs, chief executive officer.
Yes.
So, and phone calls with lawyers, and went into London to Apple's huge legal department. All the lawyers really, and it's not something we look for. We put it out for consultation with young people in the community about what shall we name this new brand of the YMCA, because nobody really knew what the YMCA was. They'd heard the Village People song and thought, what's it all about, Alfie? And so we wanted to rebrand it in a way that it was a Christian charity, founded with Christian philanthropists. It welcomed all faiths and none, through homelessness, housing, family, education, etc. And how could we rebrand this for the really multi-faith, multinational community of Woking and Surrey? So we did a competition with the young people there, and one of the young ladies we were working with came up with the name YPod, and that won the competition at board level. So it was through consultation, and of course the YMCA have had the brand on Y for years, and pod is an Old English definition term, pod. I teased the lawyer and I said, if we renovated some toilets as an outreach and called them P-pods, would you still want to sue me? And he didn't answer. But they backed off in the end.
So they let you keep it in the end.
They let us keep it in the end, yeah.
But it is the case that God called you in. God uses the giftings that we have.
Yeah.
God called you into starting this business, the YMCA.
Yeah.
But it's not stopped there. I mean, you run this thing, Think Music Media. That's Is that a company that you're running yourself? What is the idea behind that?
I was meeting people, record producers, making lots of money, lots of albums, some real big hitters in television and film. And very quickly, some tracks that I placed ended up on a drug relapse prevention DVD. Then on the back of that, the guy who did that wanted some music for a TV show he was developing at ITV. And I gave him some music to put on it, and within a week, Discovery Channel International bought the rights, and it became ITV's biggest selling TV show, called Monkey Business. So then I had to put the golden eggs in the goose, I call it. So I did it the wrong way around. I landed the TV show, got my music on, then I had to create a load more music and a business from that. So again, it was by faith and prayer and just the gifts and talents and heart that God had put in me, really.
I think golden egg's probably not a bad description either, because it does seem as though most of the things that you've been involved in over these sort of latter years of your life have worked really well. I mean, to the point that your first date that you took your now wife on, where did you take her?
Well, I took her to Buckingham Palace,
That's a
to the
pretty good
Queen's
gig.
Garden Party,
Yes, not just on the tour around the house. Yeah, what were you invited for?
I was there because of the outstanding work that we'd done in Surrey through the YMCA.
So working with young people.
Yeah.
That must have been quite an experience for you.
Yeah, it was really surreal. I mean, you're in your office and you get a phone call and it's the Lord Lieutenant's office commanding you to go to Buckingham Palace, and you're waiting for the punchline, one of your pals, pulling your leg.
Looking for Jeremy Beadle around the corner.
Exactly, and it doesn't, and it carries on, and then they do the security checks and ask who you want to go with you. And I'd known my wife for 20 years. I've known my wife 20 years. Her mum was like my spiritual mum. And at that time, which was maybe 7 years ago, we were becoming really good friends and becoming closer. And so she got commanded to, by order of the Lieutenant, to come to Buckingham Palace with me.
That's a pretty good first date.
It is.
Where did you take it for your second date?
I set a standard.
Should we draw a veil over that?
No, actually, I can tell you, I think the second date actually was Bond Street, just round the corner from Bond Street, at a lovely Italian, and that's where I proposed.
Oh, you old smoothie.
And I went to Tiffany's, greeted at the door, man in hat suit. I gave her a budget, she got the ring, and then we went to Paris, first class Eurostar.
Oh, look at you, eh? You know, treat a girl well.
Exactly, thank you.
Indeed. Are you a very driven person? What is that you're doing there in that picture?
Yeah, that we was last year, just before Christmas, we went to Bulgaria and did a tour of, they call them the gypsy churches.
Yeah.
Very poor churches,
Yes.
but so rich in the presence and the power of God, you know. And some orphanages out there. A friend of mine runs a charity called Where There's a Need, and his wife had seen a TV show about really bad orphanages out there and a lot of abuse and a lot of other
Yes.
things going on. So they felt led to really help the good orphanages out there. And as you can see, I mean, it was such a delight to be able to bless these young children who've got nobody, no homes, no families, no nothing. They've been left on the street. And if they weren't looked after by these people, you hear stories of them getting sold on the border for €2,000, you know. So it was a great honour and privilege to be able to take them out, some aid, some gifts, some finance, and to share the gospel all around Bulgaria.
And it does kind of put things into perspective, doesn't it? That when you go there and you give them, like we saw in those pictures, you know, what are, let's be honest, very simple, often very cheap little presents, they react as though you've given them £1 million.
Yes, I mean, the concept behind this is truly amazing, because we asked the orphanages to ask the kids what they really wanted for Christmas. And then with that list, we got people to help us to give the kids exactly what they really wanted. So they got not just a gift, but they got what they really, really wanted.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And that's why they were so delighted and so blessed. But it's like all things, you go out there to bless and give, but you get so much by being there, you know.
It seems to me that you are continually saying that you're led of God. God is at the core of what you do. Following him, you find yourself in the right place at the right time.
Yes, and just of late, the last 9 months, as it's a new season of my life, as I've moved on from the YMCA, we felt that season end and being called North with more of a national remit and international. And we've been doing lots of stuff with charities, strengthening leaders, churches strengthening leaders, preaching in churches, doing outreaches, lots of evangelism, and flowing in that call and gift on my life, like 100% now. And as I've wanted to build a charity or build a business or do something, I've started to lose my peace. So as I've let go and leaned into God and allowed him to open doors and him to continue to build my life, then huge doors have been opening, you know, which I couldn't have got through. So I'm not a great networker. I'm not a great businessman, although I can network and I've learned some principles of business. But really, the gift and the call of God has been the orchestration of everything on my life, you know?
You've known your struggles as well, because for a long time you really battled depression, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And that was really interesting, because after I had a really powerful Christian conversion, it came shortly after that.
Right.
That's when it came.
Where did it come from, do you know?
Yeah, it came from the fact that I'd been going full on this direction for 28 years. Suddenly, I realized Jesus has died for me personally. I get touched and filled by the power of the Holy Spirit. I become all new, which is amazing, but I don't know how to walk this way. So I'm stuck on my own. Maybe a bit like Jeremiah of old, you know. They say he was a manic depressive too. So I didn't know what to do, where to go, what to do. So I became isolated. And when you become isolated and on your own, I mean, you've only got yourself to look at, and that pretty is depressing, you know. So that led to a depressive season in my life, yeah.
I know you've just finished sort of cataloguing and charting some of this story in your book. Cue the plug, Born Ready, okay. Were you, I mean, it's an interesting title, Born Ready. Were you, do you think, born ready for success? Were you born ready to succeed? Were you a silver spoon in the mouth baby?
I wasn't, definitely not a silver spoon. No, I think we had plastic spoons in our house.
Where do you come from originally?
I come from a council estate in Greater Manchester.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've come home now that you've come north?
I've come back home again, which is great,
Yeah. And what was it like for you growing up?
It was strange because my parents were the age of grandparents. So I was a twinkle in my dad's eye and my mum's eye in the later years, really. So I was sort of the unwanted child, unexpected child, and I felt sort of unwanted. They brought up 2 girls and 2 boys, and I came along, and my brothers and sisters had left home, and they had children the same age as me. So it was a bit strange in that respect.
When you look back on that feeling of being unwanted, as an adult looking back on it, was it a valid feeling that the young Terry felt?
I think yes, because I did spend a real lot of time alone. My father did regular night shifts down a local mine. My mum was working regular. Now, they were doing that to provide for us, and they gave us as much love as they could. They worked with the best hands that they had, really. However, I'd come home from school and there was nobody there, and there was a note, saying your meal's in the microwave. And so I sort of brought myself up. So it was a lonely childhood.
Where did it take you? Because reading some of the things that you got up to with your kestrel and with various pets and air rifles and so on, it does kind of sound a bit like the makings of a Ken Loach film. It reminded me a bit of Kes.
Yes, that's right. And I think at the time that's what we had, on a council estate in Manchester. We had surrounded by fields and slag heap and wildlife and stuff, so the birds of prey became appealing.
You got into punk for a while, because we are of a similar age.
Yeah.
And I remember punk. I was a rocker, but you were obviously a punk.
Yeah.
You sang in a band as well.
I did, yes.
It was a very angry type of music, often, punk.
Yeah.
Was that expressing what was already in there, or was that nurturing what was in there?
I think it was a bit of both, really. There was definitely, anger was there from my dad dying. I became very angry then. And it was almost bottled up, suppressed. And then I think the punk sort of revolution gave that a leash for a lot of us who were feeling similar things at that time, And so the energy and the vitality, and I think the innovation and creativity of punk really resonated with me, And so did the amphetamine and then the drugs and everything else that came a little later.
That's what came along with it, wasn't it? It was the drugs and crime and...
Yeah.
And, you spent some time at Her Majesty's Pleasure?
I did, yeah. I got put in an attendance centre when I was 13, then in the care of the local authority. I went to detention centre, the sharp shock, that didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And then I went to Borstal, another film of that time with Ray Winston. And then on the back of that, I just went full on into Class A controlled drugs, heroin substitutes, cocaine, then when they weren't available, anything and everything, and got deeper and deeper into varying levels of crime, starting off petty at school and then escalating, to dealing drugs, buying drugs, deception, stealing from banks, robberies, all kinds of heavy stuff really, and got involved with some serious gangs near the end.
A lot of people talking about a lifestyle like that and those experiences will go, and in it, I was trying to find an answer. Was that the case for you, or was it that what had happened with your dad dying and the emotions you felt around that and never being able to reconcile that? Was it a case that actually the lifestyle just grew out of it? It wasn't that you were so much hunting for some sort of solution or some sort of engagement?
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. It did sort of organically grow, and you develop layers and layers on your heart and in your mind, and then there comes a cut-off point, especially when you start injecting heroin, into every vein in your body. You're putting your life on the line every day. When you're going out engaging in criminal activity, and when you're hanging around with some of these guys, and the sort of guy I become, your life is on the line every day. And I've said recently that when you've got nothing left to lose, you've got nothing left to lose. So I didn't have a hope, I didn't have a future. So literally I was living for the moment, for the day,
So what changed it? At what point did you start to look beyond all that to seek God?
It first happened when I was 20 years of age, just before I went to Borstal. we were in a friend's house and taking drugs and partying to a degree, we'd call it that. And a friend of mine picked a book up and started reading these spells out, getting involved in witchcraft. And I saw all this demonic activity happening in the room.
Had you had any sort of Christian church experience before that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been born and raised a Roman Catholic, and I'd been an altar boy. And I used to do the daily readings.
Alien to you?
The concept of faith and God wasn't alien, but the concept, it was all mental assent or reiteration of stuff, but it wasn't a strong reality, and there was no real substance to it.
So you started to see these occult images, demonic images?
Yeah, and it really freaked me out. And I told my mum about it, as all, wild, angry young men do. I went running home to mum, and she said, God's warning you. And another friend knocked on the door, and he was experiencing the same sort of stuff. So he went to an evangelist on the estate who'd been sharing the gospel with us all, that God loved us, Jesus died for us, he's got a plan for your life. Very simple message. And we listened to him. I always respected him. He had boldness, confidence, and I just respected him. So we went and knocked him up in the middle of the night, which he was really happy about, actually, hanging out of his window, saying, "What's up?" And we were just freaking out on his doorstep. And we told him, and he said, "Yes, God does love you. Jesus died for you, but there's also a devil, and you've been messing around in his camp, and Jesus died to also break that power off your life." So I say, if he would have said, "Jump 5 times backwards through loops of fire," I would have done. But he didn't. He said, "Get on your knees. You need to repent of all your sin and ask God to forgive you through what Jesus did on the cross and accept him into your life," which I did.
So where did that take you then?
Well, this is a good story, because my friend who was with me joined a church, became a true apprentice, got a job actually in a dental type factory, working with syringes and needles, ironically. But it took me, I felt a little something, I sensed something, I realised what I had done, but I didn't realise what he had done. So I knew the decision I'd made, but I didn't fully understand what God had done for me through Jesus on the cross. Now, that happened 8 years later. So for the next 8 years, I didn't go from glory to glory, I went from gory to gory.
Yeah.
So I got involved in more drugs, more crime, more prison. I did probably the equivalent of a life sentence, but in installments. And then on my last prison sentence, which was my smallest, I started to read my little New Testament, a Gideon's Bible, one of those little red ones. And the words of Jesus from Matthew about do not worry, ironically enough, began speaking to me, and I thought, wow, who's this Matthew guy? These words are just beautiful and so powerful, yet so simple. And I started to become attracted to the person of Jesus Christ. And the more I became attracted to him, the more I wanted to find out about him. And while reading 1 Corinthians 12 one night, where it speaks about the power gifts of the Holy Spirit, and then reading 1 Corinthians 13 the next night, I said to my friend, hang on a minute, it's just mentioned gifts of tongues, interpretation, healing, miracles, and now 1 Corinthians 13, yea, though I speak in tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I'm nothing. Faith to move mountains. What is this speaking in tongues? And he spoke in an unknown tongue. I got the gift of interpretation, and the tongue simply said, Jesus died so that your sin can be forgiven.
Now, hang on a second. Where was this happening?
It happened in my friend's front room in the back streets of Greater Manchester.
And is your friend a Christian?
He is, yes.
Yes. So you spontaneously received the interpretation of the,
yes, and
the
I
gift
didn't,
of tongues that he was showing?
Yes, why asking him what the gift of tongues was?
Did that not make you feel a smidge uncomfortable that happened?
Well, no, because as soon as it was like an unusual, strange language, but in the middle of it, it spoke in English to me.
Wow.
And said, Jesus died so that your sin can be forgiven. And then the whole room lit up. The power of God, the glory of God was saturating the room and saturating my soul. So waves and waves of God's love and glory was flowing through me. And I started to cry. And my friend said, Terry, what's wrong? He'd never seen me cry. I hadn't cried since I was a child, a baby. So I'd got 15 years of anger, hatred, hurt, pain, and the wall just started to break and I started to cry. And he said, what's wrong, Terry? And without even realizing it, I said, Jesus died so that my sins can be forgiven. And if you believe in your heart, Jesus died for you, you shall be saved. You know, if you confess Jesus as Lord and Savior, which I did, unwittingly, not knowing, you know.
And in that moment, did you understand that that which you'd experienced 8 years earlier was finally coming to fruit, was finally growing up?
No, I didn't. Because I was so screwed up. My mind and my body and my whole person was so in a mess. I just knew that God loved me, you know. I didn't think back, you know.
So how long did it take for that then to lead you into the man who built the YMCA and the all the things that are going on now?
Yeah. Wow, it progressively took the next 20 years, really. That happened 20 years ago now. So a couple of years later, I had a very powerful healing experience in a church in Sheffield where I made home, you know. That was so important for me to start to get discipline and purpose in my life and, you know, sense the presence of God and allow Him to start healing me, my whole soul and my mind. I had a very powerful encounter again, somebody praying for me that any mental scars would be healed, and that same power flooded through my body
What
again.
difference did that make when that happened?
Oh, huge. Absolutely.
How did you know that there was something different?
Monumental. Because as somebody prayed for me, that same power that rose Christ from the grave and that same power that touched me 8 years, well, no, a couple of years previously now, it just saturated my mind, my head, like heat, like electricity. And I'd heard about this before and been a little bit skeptical, but it was like electricity and heat and waves of the love of God, and I was weeping and weeping again like a baby. And for the first time in my life, now I had peace of mind. And the world looked green and the sky looked blue and the sun shone. And I woke up feeling peace, and I put my head on my pillow and I felt peace and love. And I didn't feel restless anymore. It had all been shut down by the healing power of God.
And now, when you look back on all of that, was it a case of God transformed it, new start, and then you move forward? Or is it a case that God is still continuing to perhaps look at and address some of those things that you carried, those scars you carried from your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spoke about my marriage and my relationship with my wife, which is glorious and blissful. We have a great marriage. And if I hadn't have been single for so long, yeah, God put some people in relationships and marriage and heals them that way. He chose to keep me single so that any rejection that was in my life, it had to be isolated.
To work it through.
So I had to get my acceptance from God. I had to get my healing, my comfort from God. And I think my soul was so damaged, my mind, my will, my emotions. I needed such a healing that's how God did it for me, you know. And I'm so grateful and thankful.
It's been great to speak to you, Terry. Thank you for coming and joining us. I think sometimes we can look at people and think that because they're successful, they must be different to us, better than us. Maybe they had a better start. Maybe they had people to help them along. And for some of them, maybe that's true. But the reality is it's not where we've come from, or indeed what we can do, or even sometimes what we do, that determines whether we will be a success in God. It is whether, as Terry has said, and as he says in his book, Born Ready, whether we listen to God, let Him take the lead, and ensure that we're in a place to follow Him, a true apprentice, hired for His glory. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Paul.